everybody, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with My Friends. We're having another discussion today, a midrash with our friends. You know Scott, of course. Say hi to you, Scott. And Lois is back with us again.
Hello.
And we have our friend Lisa, who doesn't like to be on camera, so you probably won't see her.
That's all you're going to see of Lisa. That's it. We're done.
I feel like Wilson over the fence.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're going to be continuing our discussion and our teaching on the new series, The Restoration, which, as you know, is the restoration of Yeshua's restoration, the Messiah's restoration of all things. And those things include restoration of the land, restoration of the 12 tribes of all the people, restoration of the temple, and then restoration of peace in the land by defeating his enemies. So today, in the study of the book of Numbers, we are going to study the Red Heifer, and this is Parashah Hukkat, which means regulation. So grab a cup of coffee and grab your Bible, and let's get studying in a midrash today. So, okay guys, so remember now, we're studying the book of Numbers, which is Bamidbar, in the wilderness. And one of the things we're going to learn today, because Scott did some research on this, was that this is not talking, they weren't completely in the desert or wilderness desert like we think they are. So the idea of being in the wilderness is the idea of being in the wilderness of the nations, outside of the land. So we see that the whole goal is to go, you're in the wilderness, so you're in the chaos, and this is slide 2 for those who are following along, and you're going through the door into the house of the head person. And that's what the story of the book of Numbers or Bamidbar is about. Okay, so yeah, it's desert, wilderness, but at the same time it's out of the land wilderness too.
Mm-hmm. I think the wilderness, we think of the wilderness, we go, what wilderness do I know of? If you're in California, it's the Mojave Desert. You know, we think of maybe Sahara Desert, miles and miles and miles and miles of desert, nothing around, and that's not what wilderness necessarily means in this context.
True. Okay. Now this parashah, this will be slide 3. This is Hukkat, which means regulation, and it's covering several things, which is so fun. Most of the time we just teach on the Red Heifer, but it's not just the Red Heifer. It's the Red Heifer, and we're going to look today at how that's linked to the woman who was healed of the issue of blood. There's a link there. We'll look at the death of Miriam, which has a lot of implication. The Moses and Aaron striking the rock instead of speaking to the rock. And then finally, the bronze serpent on the pole. Those are the areas we're going to look at today. But we're going to start out now with the Red Heifer. Now, I know you guys are pretty familiar with the Red Heifer, right? Most people are. And I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail with it. Kind of give a lot of people, if this is like your first time really understanding the Red Heifer, we'll go over some outlines on it, but there's really good teachings online. If you want to get more into it, Mark Biltz has a good teaching on the Red Heifer. Rico Cortez does. Jim Staley actually did a really good teaching when he had his ministry. So those are good places.
Well, the one thing that strikes me in all of these things, and they're all together in one parashah, is it's all about Yeshua. This is Yeshua.
It's true.
The whole thing is pictures of Yeshua.
I love that. Yeah, people think like a red cow, really. But yeah, there's all kinds of layers there.
I mean, because Yeshua was taken outside the camp.
Yeah, we're going to look at that.
So, I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it totally is.
So that's a good thing. For our church friends, that's, you know, we all love the Old Testament, but it's always so, but what does it mean? What's it for? And we say, well, it's foreshadowing, you know, it's typing shadows and whatever, but what does that mean? Well, I think as we look at it in a new way, remember talking last week about the fact that it's not magical thinking. It's that there's real messages about Yeshua here. We're going to talk about some of the history and then the actual desert itself and things today. And when you get down into the realities of them being on the ground, walking around, and then what they were being told, all of a sudden it comes to life. And it goes from black and white to color. You've heard Teresa say that before.
Very true. Yes, very true. So this is actually Numbers, Parashah 39, if you're following the Torah readings. Numbers 19, chapter 19, verse 1 through 22, verse 1. And we're going to start out with the Red Heifer. But before we do that, there's something I want to explain about the Red Heifer. Now, the Red Heifer in the Hebrew is the Parah Adamah. The Parah is the Red Heifer. It's the word for Red Heifer. The Adamah is red. Okay, so Parah Adamah. The other place, I just discovered this morning, The other place where the parah is used that I have taught about in the past is in the story of Pharaoh's dream, in the story of Joseph. The shriveled cows and the fat cows were all parah. So I actually I'm going to link this a little bit since we do talk about end-time prophecies for those of you who have followed this before, my Blood Moons teachings. We are in 4 war cycles, and we're in cycle number 3 right now. So let me point this out. I've got a pen pointer. So the first war cycle started in the year 2000, September 30th of 2000, and that represented the fat cows, the parah, which is interesting that this is the story of the red parah today. So we had 7 years of fat cows, which represented the beginning of gathering the cattle, the sheep and goats. And then we had 7 years of shriveled cows, or cattle, and sheep and goats. For the first 14 years, from 2000 to 2014, the first 14 years of the war cycles was all about the gathering in of sheep and goats. Right? So this would be more related to Judah, and some of Ephraim too, some of that as well. Now, right now we're in the 3rd war cycle. We're about right here, almost to the middle of the war cycle now. This started in 2014. Let's switch this a little bit so I can reach it. Anyway, so right about in here. And now what we have is fat wheat, which in the Hebrew is a shibboleth. It's shibboleth. It's like the harvested wheat. Right?
That's the word that they had to say right.
Yes, it is. Sorry, yeah. So we're right now, and that means it's an easy harvest. So right now, God is beginning to harvest His people out of the nations, right? And there's different stages of that. But then, as we get into the last of the war cycles, it'll be 2021. We'll hit the shriveled wheat, or the famine, basically. And it'll be a famine of the word, possible real famine. The shriveled wheat means it's going to be a difficult harvest. It'll be harder to come out of the nations. Now that's my theory on this. We'll have to see if it plays out. So far a lot of this has actually played out because these 4 war cycles seem to be accelerating in intensity. So if you haven't seen my teaching on that, you can go back on my website and look at the Blood Moons teaching from the Blood Moons conference. And that'll explain a lot of that. I also cover this in the What in the World is Happening series that I was doing. So a lot of that's covered there. But anyway, I just thought it was really interesting that the parah of the red heifer is the same parah, same word used here for these.
Just came to be interesting. I don't know if it means anything at all, but you notice as soon as they get done with the whole rock and water incident, and they're at Kadesh and Miriam's died, and they get ready to leave and they go out and they want to go up the highway, they immediately run into Edomites, Esau, like next in the story. So is there a relationship between the red heifer and then they come out and immediately they have to deal with Esau red?
That could be. So I think we'll
red, yes.
Yeah.
There's a theme of red all through here.
Yes.
right. There's like a couple themes. You're right. There's red
And the scarlet cord.
And
there's
water.
And the
Those are
scarlet
the major
cord.
themes of this. So we're seeing there's all kinds of prophetic things. So we'll just start unpacking it. It's so much fun.
And no, we won't make it all the way through today, so you need to keep studying on your own.
Yes. So first of all, some basic things about the red heifer. It's a young red female cow. It has perfectly red hair with no defects. That's the requirement. And has never borne a yoke. So we know what's happening right now with the Temple Institute, right?
Do they have what they think is already?
Well, they keep finding these red heifers, but they keep getting disqualified.
Right.
Yeah. So what the Temple Institute has done, they've brought in female red heifers that are birthing age, calving age, and they are trying to breed now using genetic research and DNA. They're working with them to try to breed a perfect red heifer, and I think there's several of them that are pregnant right now. I was just looking on the Temple Institute. There's maybe 4 or 5 of them that are pregnant right now, and so they're gonna see if they give birth to a perfect red heifer.
But here is an incident of where man is taking control and trying to control the outcome, and I'm not sure that that's where Yah is.
Sort of like I think we would agree that the temple they're going to build may be a physical replica or it's built to standard that David got and gave to Solomon, but spiritually it's not yet it. Yah doesn't locate there, Yah doesn't live there, Yah doesn't put his stamp of approval on it. Maybe in the same way they're trying to produce a red heifer, but it's not been built by God.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't know. We kind of wait and see. We're kind of, it's like we watch these things.
Yes.
You know, some of it, we just to see what happens and we go, oh.
But but it's always interesting to me how man tries to take it into his own hand and make the results happen that they want.
Because it's supposed to be supernatural.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. Anyway, so never born a yoke, so they have to make sure it's all, the cow is raised kosher, basically, really, really carefully. And then it's sacrificed on the Mount of Olives. So we're going to look at a picture of that in a second. And when it's sacrificed, it's facing the door of the temple. So I'm going to go to this, next slide here. So when they sacrifice the red heifer, this is what it looks like here. This is the temple. This is during the time of the second temple. So here it's temple. And here, this is where the red heifer has been chosen. They built this huge bridge, and you see all these archways. That was to keep the people from accidentally walking on a grave. Yeah. So it kept it clean.
Oh, and I heard some teaching where that is considered the valley of the shadow of death. There.
Yeah.
So Psalm 23 plays into this whole thing that's going on here as well.
Yeah. Now this is the Mount of Olives, so they all come to the Mount of Olives, and then the priest doesn't have to be the high priest. It doesn't even really specify it. It has to be a priest. But the priest usually does it. Will sacrifice the heifer, red heifer here, and the red heifer will be facing the door of the temple. The curtain and the doorways are opened at that time when they have a red heifer, and then the priest has to kill, break or cut its throat, and then the whole thing is burnt up. Nothing. There's no blood manipulation. There's no splashing on the altar. It's outside the camp, kind of. Which I thought was really interesting. So
Well,
this is what it would have looked like.
We talked about that this morning. It's outside the camp, and then the Cohen's supposed to take some of its blood with his fingers, sprinkled toward the front of the tent. Now, but he's like way far away. Teresa's got a picture of there's the camp.
Here's the camp. Okay, so this is what it would have looked like. Here's the tabernacle. This is east, right here, because here's Judah on the east. So they would have had to take the red heifer way out here, I would think.
And
Outside
sprinkle
the
it
camp.
toward. They just sprinkle it toward
the tabernacle.
Toward the tabernacle.
Yeah.
Because they're outside the camp.
A whole lot easier in the temple time. But I was looking at this going, wow, I wonder if they had to...
I wonder if there was a mountain on the east side there that they used, some sort of a hill or something, to where they could actually see.
They did in temple times because it was the Mount of Olives.
Yes, but I'm wondering in the tabernacle.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But the first one, I don't know. That'd be interesting to know where they were and try to figure. There's a high point.
Yeah.
I bet you there's a high point on that
Oh,
side.
I'm
so
sure.
Yeah.
So they could see it
Yep.
as a foreshadow and a type of what Messiah would.
Yeah. So anyway, so he sacrificed on the Mount of Olives, and then he's facing the doors of the temple, and the person doing the sacrifice does not have to be a priest. Again, this is slide 6, if you're following along. Then the body is completely burned to ash in this, with cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet yarn, and we're going to look at that in the next slide. The ashes are then mixed with, has to be living water. In temple times, it was the pool of Siloam, the water from the pool of Siloam, which living water is water that's running. It's coming from a spring or something. So. And then young priests who are virgins are the ones to mix the ashes. And these are children who are raised from birth in the temple. So they're Levitical children. So they're Levites. They're children of probably the Cohen, the descendants of Aaron. They're born and raised in the temple itself. And then when it's time, I'm going to show you the picture of this. When it's time for them to collect the ashes, they're carried on the back of bulls, so that their feet, they never touch the ground. So they're purified, they're pure the whole time. And then they get down and they scoop up the water and get back on, and then they take them back to mix the ashes, which I thought was really interesting.
What comes to mind with this being raised in the temple and doing all this is like Samuel.
Yeah.
And there may have been more than just Hannah that gave their sons to the temple to work or to be part of that. So
I bet there was more than that.
Well, I think that's a really good point. In the church, we still tend to throw out, if it's Jewish, then it's all tradition, and we lump it all in one container, throw out the baby with the bathwater. But there is lots of good understanding to understand what they did and why, because they really did have a spiritual background and they were trying to implement what God had told them what to do. Can you find it in Torah? No. But these guys spent their lives evaluating it and trying to physically implement the intent of Torah, and so that's how you ended up with that, because they were trying to, in my world, the spirit and intent of the code. They were trying to implement the spirit and intent of the code, and that's what they came up with. And who is to say that God didn't talk to them, or the Spirit didn't talk to them and say, do it like this, because what it does is it fulfills all its requirements for cleanliness and purity and all those sorts of things. And this is how you actually physically do it, because it has to happen where the bull has to, where the cow has to be killed. These things have to happen. Now, how do we do it in a way that accomplishes all the things that he wanted to do, that included all the symbols that he wanted them to include in the ceremony?
Yeah, and you actually find the whole detail. All the ceremony for this is found in the Mishnah. So you can go in and actually find in detail everything about it. It's pretty. I haven't done that yet. That's something I want to do. So, okay, let's look at the symbolism of this real quick. And again, we're going through this really fast, just because we already understand a lot of the symbolism of this. So for example, a young red female cow. Red is equal to sin. So you think of the red thread, the red cord. They throw the red thread in. So red is sin. Female cow is Israel, all 12 tribes. So we have a red heifer, a sinful, all 12 tribes are sinful. Now, it's interesting that when they use the ashes, it's not to deal with sin, but with uncleanliness, being unclean for a dead body. Right. So it doesn't have anything to do with sin in this case. So, anyway. So, it's never born a yoke. So this red heifer is never born a yoke. And yoke is equal to man's dogma of religion. So it's kind of cool. You can see some of these things. And also you can see, in a sense, you can see Yeshua in a lot of this as well, especially on the next one. Sacrifice on the Mount of Olives. Some people suggest that Yeshua was crucified on the Mount of Olives. They don't really know exactly where, but that's one possibility.
You can make a pretty good case for that.
Yes, you can. The body is completely burned up after the blood. The blood is sprinkled. It's not manipulated. It's not splashed on an altar. It's not any of those things. It's just sprinkled, right? As we were talking about. And it's just like with the fingers. It's like that. And then it's completely burned up. And then they throw in cedar wood, which represents humanity, hyssop, which represents healing, and then the red yarn, which represents sin, mixed with water, which water is the Holy Spirit. Isn't that fun? But didn't you have some information on hyssop, Scott?
Oh, I had a couple things. Teresa and I were talking about this morning with the the ashes, and I went, well, where else do we think of those? They were in the woman suspected of adultery.
Yeah, you have ashes and water.
Then you had
well, not ashes, but the dust.
Well, dust. So not ashes, but that was a similar concept. I was just thinking similar concepts. How about the golden calves, where they, Moses, he came down the mountain, Aaron, my favorite line, one of my favorite lines of the Bible. I don't know, we threw the gold in and these calves came out. Yeah. Come on, Aaron. But anyway, and so they ground those, and they had to drink it. And then there was also with the lepers, where they put it in the, and they sprinkled them with hyssop and used the hyssop experience. So it's the sprinkling, and it's a combination of putting it into the water for cleansing. But anyway, hyssop, just a couple things. Bees like it. They use it for bees to create honey.
Oh.
There's all kinds of stuff there. Today's hyssop is also an antiseptic, and it's an expectorant. And just so for a visual, it looks like lavender or sage or something like that.
Okay.
So there's all kinds of stuff there. But let let's look at cedar for a second, and I just sort of checked it down. So it wasn't just a couple sticks of wood. Real quickly, so cedar trees in the forests of Lebanon, and Lebanon's not that far from Israel, from Joppa on the coast up to Tyre, where Hiram sent the big logs down.
Right.
It's about 100. It's about 100 miles, so they had to float a long way. But still, these cedar trees. I don't know how many of you have been to Yosemite or Northern California and seen the forest, but these things could be 30 to 40 feet in diameter, and they up to 90 feet high. These are huge, big trees that were used for Solomon's temple, David's temple. The wood, the grove had a great odor, and we talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
We talk about the
Cedar
odor where
wood.
the smell test, where Yeshua gives us the smell test. That wood is not subject to decay or worms or anything like that. It's hard, and it doesn't break down over time. And so the whole thing is it's a powerful tree. It's a great building material. It's got all kinds of prophetic symbology, and also it is just a great naturally occurring, God-created, naturally occurring material that we can use over and over and over. So it's a at that time it might have been juniper in the wilderness, but when they got to the temple, they were actually using cedar, and so there was a reason he said specifically cedar, because it was a valuable wood and probably burned really well for a long time, being as hard as it was.
Imagine the smell of cedar wood burning.
So one of my themes today is let's look at the realities of what it was and what these really were. I mean, Hiram later on bound together these huge logs. They might have been 50 feet long, 60 feet long, whatever, and floated them down, just down the coast, from where they were on Tyre in Lebanon down to Joppa, past Caesarea. So it's really good to understand the relationship between Israel and Lebanon to the north.
Now, do you guys remember one of the places that Solomon built in the palace was called the Forest of Lebanon? Do you remember that? What was it? Do you remember what it was for? I couldn't remember what it was for.
I think that was for his first wife, wasn't it? Was that for his first wife?
No, that was a palace for him, and he had a different palace that you're talking about. But anyway, we haven't studied out, so don't.
Yeah, but I thought of that. I thought of that. Solomon built the Forest of Lebanon. It was part
Forest of Lebanon was actually the forest. He had a palace somewhere.
Yeah. But they had actually built a room called that. I remember seeing that. I thought that was pretty cool. But I don't know that they know really what it was for. Just that it was there. Anyway, you guys have any insight into hyssop? Cedar, water?
Well, when I think of hyssop, I think of, they took the hyssop and put the vinegar on it and offered it to Yeshua.
There's another one.
Yeah, there's another one. Well, if you think about it, though, it could have all the elements of the crucifixion. So if he was crucified on the Mount of Olives, red would represent sin or the blood. Hyssop, they used hyssop to give him the vinegar. Cedar.
Well, they also use the hyssop to paint the door frames.
Yes,
It was a Passover.
They did it
And Moses used hyssop after he'd finished pronouncing all the commandments.
Yeah.
Moses dipped it in the blood. He sprinkled the book and the people. Hyssop was what he used to sprinkle the blood. So there's a whole study in itself right there.
Right,
Just
hyssop.
Yeah, that's really cool. And then the red yarn or the scarlet thread. You remember about the scarlet thread? It's the story of Yeshua woven all the way through. So yeah, there's all kinds of elements of this. And then the last thing would be water. You mix it with water, and what came out of Jesus' side was blood and water. So you see a lot of the elements in this.
It's interesting that we're going to run into the next part of this parasha is Moses and his problem striking the rock twice. The water runs all the way through this.
Yeah,
right.
Water. That's going to be fun. Okay, no more comments on that one? We're good? Okay. Now, the ashes, once they've got the red heifer all burnt up, they collect the ashes, and they actually have to do something special with the ashes. So the ashes are to purify those who are unclean due to touching a dead body, right?
Now, unclean due to touching a dead body. That's what they were for. It wasn't some magical cleansing you from sin or whatever it was. It was if you were unclean because you touched a dead body. Pretty specific.
Very specific.
Yeah. If a person dies in their tent or house, everything in the house is unclean then. So they would use the same thing. They'd get the hyssop, they'd dip it in the water, and they would sprinkle it on the house, on the family, and they would have to be sprinkled on the 3rd and 7 days. So this was a 7-day purification period. Now, what do you guys see in the 3rd and 7th days?
Well, the 3rd day you think of resurrection.
Uh-huh.
On the 7th day you think of the millennial where he returns.
Right, first and
Okay.
second coming. Good one, Lisa. Yeah, so they were sprinkled them clean on the 3rd day, which is what, in the sense we just talked about in the death and crucifixion of Yeshua, representing the cleanliness of, or the purification of those unclean through his crucifixion and death and resurrection. When he returns, he's going to do it again, not be crucified again, but he'll be clean us again. He'll be cleaned on the 7th day. Right? Now, if we remember that we started back in, I started the slide talking about the 4 war cycles that started in the year 2000. It kind of takes us back to the idea of the 7,000th year, or the 7th day. Now, we talked about this last week, is that in Jewish thought, well, in Christian thought, we have the tribulation first, and then Yeshua comes and ends it, and they start the 7th day, or the 7,000th year. In Jewish teaching, the 7,000th year starts in chaos, and then Yeshua comes and brings order to chaos, so that we're already in the 7,000th year. There's some evidence that the 7,000th year started in 2000, the year 2000. There's good evidence for that.
The 6,000th or the 7,000th?
The seventh day.
The 7th mountain.
The millennial
The
reign.
millennial reign. And
Yeah,
it
we are
starts in
6 to
chaos.
7.
Yeah, we are in the 7,000th year since creation, because it's been 2,000 since Yeshua died.
Okay.
So we're now in the chaos part, the beginning part of the millennial reign, which is all chaos and wars and Israel's enemies rising up to defeat his people, and then forces Messiah to come and again do the same things to restore all things.
Create.
I was just thinking about that concept of death defiling something and not making it clean, and it's not clean. And again, Yah needs to be the clean place, and there's that difference between approaching him physically because you're clean and still being part of the kingdom. It's just that you're not clean. There's this cleanliness thing is only not being clean. It's not being righteous. It's not being righteous. It's just not being clean.
Yeah.
And so, but look at that. There was not supposed to be any death at the beginning. In the beginning, there was no death, and Yah could just be with us. And then human death came in, and that's something. There's more than just you got a decaying body. It's something he never intended to happen. That's a thing that is totally foreign. It's anathema to him. He never intended these bodies to die, and because of what we did, then they do. So it is it's a constant reminder of his original plan gone wrong. Anyway.
Oh.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, think about it. Adam and Eve basically disobeyed and caused themselves to be dead, although they weren't physically dead yet.
But they were.
Right.
But they were the walking dead.
They started the dying
They
process.
started the dying process. They were the walking dead. What is leprosy? It's the walking dead. If a person touches a dead body, they're the walking dead. It's the same thing over and over again.
Right.
Wow.
It's because it's going to say, as we get down into 13, anybody who touches the corpse, no matter whose body that is, does not purify himself, has defiled the tabernacle.
Ooh, that's
you touch
important.
a corpse, you defiled the tabernacle. I'm not sure I understand everything about that, but how does that work? I mean, that's important. And then what happens if he doesn't get cleansed? He's supposed to be cut off from Israel. We're only talking about touching dead bodies here, and we're only talking about being clean, but it defiles the tabernacle, and if you don't get cleansed with the water, then you're supposed to be cut off from Israel. Now, I don't have a clue yet why that's so important to God, but it's important enough for him to write it down and make it very clear to us. We have to understand what was the reason for God going, this is just obnoxious. It's repugnant to me. I cannot have this around me. Get this fixed.
Who else gets put outside the camp if they're unclean? Lepers.
Lepers.
Wow, that's true. And the other thing that they had to do, if they had their toilets were outside the camp, because the Lord your God is walking around inside the camp, and so that area is clean. It's the same kind of thing. The idea of the tabernacle is the house of the Lord, or the area in the camp is the house of the Lord, and it's supposed to be clean.
Right.
So dead bodies or people that had touched dead body, nobody with leprosy. Women couldn't go into the temple because they were unclean due to their niddah, during their period, their menstrual cycle. So it's this idea of not being sinful, but just being not clean.
Right.
I like to use the analogy of God lives in this beautiful mansion, and he's got white furniture and this thick white carpet, that plush white carpet, and everything is beautiful and lush and clean. And if we come to visit him, and we've been out in the garden working, and our shoes are muddy, and we've got dirt all over us, and there's nothing wrong with us, but we're unclean, we're not going to want to go in and walk around on his white carpet. It's kind of that same idea.
And so then you got to get past, well, that's wrong, God should do that. And we got to get past that to go, no, we have to accept that he is the head of the family, he's the ruler of the universe, he's set it up a particular way, that's how he likes it, and now we got to figure out why that is and do our best to respond to it.
Right.
It all starts with just accepting it, as he said what he said, and we're supposed to figure out why it's important to do it, going, I don't understand, but I'm going to try. I mean, that's,
Yeah. Do what he says.
I know, yeah. We're just going to do what he says. And we don't have a red heifer, right? So we're all unclean right now. But if we're this close to building the temple, if they're close to building the temple right now, if they find a red heifer, do you know what kind of craziness will ensue?
oh gee.
Whoa, if they get the red heifer and develop the ashes and actually do this the way they're supposed to do it, that's going to be crazy over there. It's going to set off chaos. Interesting to watch.
Definitely.
All right, now, so let's see. What else are we going to say? The water is sprinkled on the person with hyssop. On the 7th day, he will wash his clothes and himself and be clean. Now, the other thing that's interesting, the person who sprinkles them is also unclean until evening. So we've got a priest, right? So we've got people who touched a dead body. Maybe grandma passed away or something. And so they had to take care of her. They had to wrap her body and bury her. And they did it really quickly back then. Then the house was unclean. The whole family was unclean. Everybody was unclean. So they have the funeral and get that all taken care of. And then the priest has to come in, sprinkle the house, sprinkle the family on the 3rd day and the 7th day. And everybody washes their clothes and mikvahs. But the priest who sprinkled them both those days is then unclean. He didn't do anything. He didn't touch a dead body. But it's almost like he's unclean.
Association.
Yeah.
It's all related in 19 all the way through the end of the chapter, but when you get down into 21 and 22, anybody who touches the water for purification will be, the person who sprinkles the water for purification is to wash his clothes. Whoever touches the water for purification will be unclean until evening. Anything the unclean person touches will be unclean, anyone who touches him will be unclean until evening. So, if you touch the water to be used for purification, you're unclean. Or if you do the sprinkling, you're unclean until evening.
Yeah.
It's like really strict.
Yeah.
And really specific. And there's something we understand about that whole ashes and water and death. I think it's all about, this whole thing's all about cleansing from death.
Huh.
And they understood it. They knew what it meant.
Right.
We don't.
I know.
It's very foreign to us.
But
Don't you wish we knew?
they knew, they knew what
Well,
the significance
my
of it
question
was.
is going to be, it's not my question is, they know and they continue it. If you're an Orthodox Jew, you get it, and this is what this means. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's absolutely right, but we as the church will throw that out and go, couldn't be. You can't possibly know.
Right.
And how can we say that? They've got to know something more than we know, because we know nothing about it, and then here we go again making it up, because we don't go back to the source.
Yeah.
you know, if we think about it, once, right now the Temple Mount's totally defiled. Because we've had people running around on it, you know, everybody goes to visit it, and nobody's been cleansed from uncleanness.
Right.
You know, who here has ever touched a dead body?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even a grave, even walked over a grave.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Or been in a house where a dead body was.
Yeah.
When my mom passed away, I kissed her goodbye.
Yeah, I mean, we've all.
Yeah, we all have.
Or hung out in graveyards when you were in high school?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I used to like to do that. Tell those stories. That was so creepy. I didn't like that. I think I may have done it once, and then I was like, ew, this is creepy. I'm not going to do it anymore. But it's true. Right now, the Temple Mount is totally defiled. So they are not going to be able to do anything with the Temple Mount, even if they regain it. If Israel gets to cleanse it. And that's why a lot of the rabbis there don't want anybody going up on the Temple Mount. They say you shouldn't because you don't want to, number one, make it worse because you're not clean. And number two, they're not quite sure where the Holy of Holies is. They are almost positive it's under the Dome of the Rock.
Right.
I think 99.9%.
Okay.
But on the off chance
Yeah.
that it's not, you
I
know.
think God may have some surprises for us there. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to
I think
find
he
out
does.
about that.
I think he
Yeah.
does.
So, yeah, so, but anyway, they're going to have a red heifer if they're going to rebuild the temple.
Right, because they have to be purified
Right.
from death.
From death. Yeah.
Mm.
So the last thing is, this water or ash mixture was called the waters of separation. So this is what we have. This is slide 11. The waters of separation, or the waters of the sin offering. Now the waters of the separation in Hebrew is the ha-nidah. Interesting, it's nidah. It's the root word for nidah, the woman's issue of the menstrual cycle.
Oh, okay.
The water of, instead of saying the water of separation in the Hebrew, it's the mayim ha-nidah.
Oh.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Now that's where we make this connection to the story of the woman with the issue of blood, and we're going to look at that. So, let's go to Mark chapter 5. Keep your bookmark there. Skip over to Mark 5, which is where we have the story of the woman with the issue of blood. One of them. There's several places, but... And for this, I'm actually going to switch to my chronological gospel. There's some cool stuff in this.
I
in this
like
story.
that.
I do too.
I really like that. Yeah, I
It
really
really
like it.
helps because
It
all the
does.
stories in chronological order.
Yes, I love it.
Totally
I
makes
love it.
sense.
Mhm.
So let's see. Here we have Mark chapter 5. You also find it in Matthew 9 and Luke 8. Those are the three places, but we're going to look at the Mark one. So I'm going to read out of this just because it uses some of the Hebrew. So one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. What is his name? Jairus?
Jairus.
They say
Jairus.
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 How to pronounce it.
By name.
Jairus or
Yeah. He came to find Yeshua. When he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. I pray you come and lay your hands on her that she may be healed, and she shall live." And we'll go back to that after this story here. So as Yeshua went with Jairus, many people followed and thronged him. On the way, there was a woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years. She had suffered many things of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not better, but rather grew worse. When she heard of Yeshua, she came in behind the crowd and took hold of, not the hem of his garment, but the tzitzit on the corners, the corner of the garment. For she said, "If I may touch but his tzitzit, I shall be whole." And immediately the flow of blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And then Yeshua turns around and says, "Who touched me?" She admits it, and then he says, "Your faith has healed you." And then he goes on and to the story of raising the dead, the little girl from the dead. But the things I want to point out with this, so Yeshua heals the woman with an issue of blood, or a permanent nidah. It's basically, she's unclean. She can't go up in the temple. Nobody can touch her. She can't be married really with her husband anymore. He's going to have to divorce her because she keeps him unclean. So he can't go up on the temple. So this is like a really big deal. And 12 years she has been unclean. Now, significance of 12 years. What do you think of when you hear 12?
The tribes.
12 tribes, which makes all of Israel. So prophetically, a lot of the stories of Yeshua that happen, yes, they really happen, but they have prophetic meanings to them of his second coming. Yeah. So we're talking about Israel. All 12 tribes will come and grab a hold of the corners of, or the tzitzit, the corner of a Jewish man. That's from, well, we'll get to that in a second. She takes hold of the corner of his talit, his kanaf.
There's completion here too. 12 months, 12 hours. You know, but there's completion in this thing. It's one cycle.
Yeah. Good. Good insight.
Yeah.
12 disciples. That's another one. There's lots of things. I looked a little bit. 12 years has a lot of implication as well.
12 days of Christmas?
Maybe not. Opa! Anyway, so you know that there's a prophecy that says, in the end of days, all the nations will come and grab the hold of the corner of a Jew and said, teach us, for we want to let us go with you. So we want to learn the ways of Torah, right? That's a prophecy of something that will happen in the end of days. Now, Joseph Good just did a really good series of teaching on corners. It's on YouTube. He just finished it. It was 5 videos and 5 teachings on the corners, on the talit, and how that relates to the 4 corners of the earth.
Wow.
So the talit, for those of you who don't know, it's the prayer shawl, but it's also the kanaf, that little undershirt that Jewish men wear. It's one long rectangular piece in the shape of the temple with 4 corners and then a head cut out of the middle. And then the man will put that over, and then he'll attach tzitzit to the 4 corners. And that helps you to remember all the commandments.
Yeah.
Right? So, but it's a prophecy that in the end of days, all the nations will come and grab a hold of a corner. And when they do, they will be brought from the 4 corners of the earth by the 4 winds back to the land. That's the great ingathering. A lot of people call it the rapture, but it's basically in gathering to the land in the end of days. So it's a prophecy and it's a physical garment. Now, what she does, what this woman does, she represents all 12 tribes of Israel. She's grabbing a hold of the corner, of the talit, of the kanaf. That's what it's called, a kanaf. And she's healed from being unclean. Now, what we just talked about being unclean. We're walking around right now unclean. All 12 tribes are unclean. People were just unclean because there's been no red heifer. So this, I think, is a prophetic story of, in the end of days, we will grab a hold of the tzitzit of Messiah and be made clean, possibly by the red heifer ashes, possibly by his coming. We'll have to see that. Now, kanaf is also the word for wings.
Okay.
So it's a corner and it's a wing. So you see in Malachi, but for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, and you will go forth and skim about like calves from the stall. So she knew this prophecy, and she said, I'm going to grab his wings, his corner. And then she, representing all 12 tribes of Israel, grabbed the corner, and at the end of days she will be pulled into the land and healed from her uncleanness.
Wow.
Isn't that fun?
That is fun.
So here's a question. So how did she get clean? So in 34, daughter. It's in 5:34. Daughter, your trust has healed you. Go in peace, be healed of your disease. So, did her trust somehow magically heal her? What did she trust in? She trusted in him. That he had the authority, that somehow she could touch him. She trusted in him. So the same way, just a question, I don't have the answer to this yet. Let's say you got sprinkled with the water from the ashes of the red heifer. If you didn't think it was going to do any good, did it? Maybe it was just in God's sight that it did. Did it actually cleanse you? Now in this case, she was healed, so she wasn't just made clean.
She was healed.
The cause of the uncleanliness was stopped, was fixed. So he actually stopped it right there.
Yeah, that's true.
But see, she had to believe that he was who Malachi was talking about. That was her faith. She understood that he was Messiah.
Right?
So when she grabbed his seat, her faith.
That's going to happen in the end of days too, because when we're gathered to the land, I think a lot of people will be there and they're not going to realize that this was the Messiah. Both the house of Judah and the house of Ephraim, they're going to have trouble recognizing him as Messiah, right? Because Judah's going to be looking for certain things from Messiah. They don't want it to be Jesus.
Right.
Christians are going to be looking for certain things of the Messiah. They don't want him to be Jewish. Well, surprise!
Yeah.
He's both. He's both. So they're going to have to reach on by faith that that's him before they can actually be healed.
And unless you do, you're not clean, and you may be, it's not a sin issue.
No.
No.
It's
Yeah.
just that you're
It's
not
not
clean.
even a salvation issue.
It's not a salvation issue,
Not a
that's it.
salvation issue.
It's
It'll
just,
be people who are saved that,
but that means you can't, physically in the land, you won't be able to move toward the temple
Right.
because you're not clean. Doesn't mean you're not
Yeah.
saved, just means you're
You're
not clean.
Yeah, that's, you have mud on your shoes and you can't go into
You
the
can't.
Father's house with the white
You're just
carpet.
not clean.
Right.
You know, you don't believe me enough to do what I ask you to do.
Huh. So anyway, it goes on here. So this next story that follows immediately on this, kind of connected to this story, is the healing or the resurrection of the little girl. So the resurrection of the temple and how that's connected to the priesthood. So if we go on and read, this is
we see
again in
12
Mark 5.
again here.
We see another
Yeah.
12. That was the connector right there. This is Matthew 9:20. As Yeshua approached Jairus' house, I'm sorry, 9, oops, we got past that. There we go, 9:23. When Yeshua came into the rabbi's house and saw musicians and others making a commotion, he said to them, "Step aside, the maid is not dead, she's just sleeping." So this doesn't give us a whole lot of information here. It's better in Mark. Oh, I was reading Matthew, no wonder.
Yeah. So what is it, Mark?
Mark 5:35, I'm sorry. My bad.
While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house came saying, "Your daughter's died, why bother the rabbi any longer?" Ignoring what they'd said, Yeshua told the synagogue official, "Don't be afraid, just keep trusting." Shall I keep reading?
Yeah.
When they came to the synagogue official's house, he found a great commotion, people weeping, wailing loudly. On entering, he said to them, "Why all this commotion and weeping?" That's Yeshua saying that. "Child's not dead, she's just asleep." They laughed. He put them outside, took the child's father and mother and those with him, and he went in where she was. Taking her by the hand, he said, "Talita kumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." At once, the girl got up, began walking around. She was 12 years old. Everybody was utterly amazed. They gave them strict orders not to say anything and told them to give her something to eat.
All right, so this little girl's 12 years old too. So we have two 12s going on here. So we're going to see the same thing. She's a 12-year-old girl, so it's alluding to Israel in some way. Right. Now, look at this. She's the daughter of Jairus. From the root word is Yair in Hebrew. It means he enlightens. The word or means light. So who and what is the light of the nations? The temple and the priesthood. It's the temple that is the light of the world. It's a city set on a hill. The priesthood is supposed to enlighten the people by the teaching of Torah. And Jairus, he was the head of the synagogue, the local community. So he was a Levite.
So just real quick there, so if you're watching this and you're new to Hebrew roots, we were talking about that earlier, not, again, midrash, we throw out ideas. Typically, anything that light, we'll throw it to Yeshua, we go, that's Messiah. Well, think about the possibility that many of those were actually temple references. Because this is a Jewish book, it was a temple reference, not a Yeshua reference,
Right.
because it was a temple reference.
Right.
Well, and when you look that up and you go back from the beginning and you follow the light, we see that the Torah is a light. Okay, that's,
True.
Right.
So that points
the
us back
Torah
to
is
Yeshua,
always
yeah.
talked about as a light, and He is the living Torah.
Right.
So,
So
Very good.
the answer, again, remember, Tevia. Well, on the other hand, you may be right. On the other hand, you might be right. What's the answer?
Yes.
Was it Yeshua or the temple?
Yes.
Now the other key to this is the name Aaron. Aaron's name in Hebrew is Aharon. He represents the Cohen, or the priesthood. And the root word for Aharon is or, again, the light. So we see another connection there to this being referencing or having a prophetic layer of the Kohen.
They're
Not just the
light.
Levites.
So is it Yeshua, the temple, or the Kohen? Yes.
So we can see this refers to the temple and priesthood, which bring light to the people. Now, a daughter. She's the daughter of the priesthood, daughters in the ancient Near East are often in reference to a temple. It's the daughter of Israel, or the beloved daughter, that refers to the temple, very, very often. And Yeshua says to her, Talitha Kumi, young girl arise. Now Talitha means in Hebrew, it could either be a taleh, which means a little lamb, which all that just itself has a lot of significance, little lamb be resurrected, or it could, most likely is na'ara, the word na'ara. It's a young girl in the age of infancy to adolescence, so right about 12 is about the time she enters adolescence, and that is also used in the term for Dinah. And we go to the story of the rape of Dinah, which is a prophetic story of the destruction or rape of the temple.
I've also heard that the Talitha could mean a little girl under the talit, as if he put his talit over her.
Ooh, that's a good one too.
Sure.
All kinds of layers here. This is amazing.
Well, look at that. You know, so who were the two that fought for, responded to, took revenge for Dinah's rape?
Simeon and
Levi.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the Cohen.
Yeah, Levi right there.
Yeah.
So I thought that, to me, this
That's
is
why we study our Bibles, so that you go, oh, I start to get it. Yeah.
connection. So to me, if you look at this in chronological order, according to the chronological Bible, first we had the woman with the issue, Israel, who is unclean with Nidah, grabbing onto the corner and being pulled and healed in the land. So it's like an ingathering of all of Israel from the four corners of the earth by the four winds. That's the ingathering. The next thing that happens is we have a resurrection of either the temple or priesthood, or both.
We have a daughter of Levi.
A daughter of Levi that's resurrected. Now, the thing that's really cool is we're going to go to the story just before all of this and see what happened. I don't have a slide for this part, but I'm going to show you what it is. So we go back to
The beginning of chapter 5.
Mark, the beginning of chapter 5.
The beginning of Mark 5.
Mm-hmm. And this is where Yeshua goes to the Arab Gadara, and the demonic, the legion, comes out. Okay, so he encounters this demon-possessed man who's in the graveyard. What does he do? He speaks to the man and says, "Don't send us into the darkness. We are legion." So there's legion of demons in this man.
Well, again, look where they're hanging out. They're hanging out in a graveyard. All the dead bodies,
Yeah,
unclean.
The whole theme of death and the graveyard.
Yeah,
And
same thing.
uncleanliness.
Right. So this whole section is talking about uncleanliness. So this man comes and says, "Okay, I will cast you out." They said, "Send us into that herd of pigs."
Which
Hello.
So you know the joke is that's where deviled ham came from.
If you didn't hear that, that's where deviled ham came from. So don't eat deviled ham. Anyway. So he casts out these demons. They go into the pigs, and what do the pigs do? They run off the cliff into the sea. In prophetic or ancient Near Eastern language, the sea represents the nations. So what did we just see? Now we're going to take this to current events. What have we seen in the last few years, at least here in the U.S.? I don't know if this is true anywhere else, but in the U.S.
Maybe it's just us.
Might be just us, but America is the end time vineyard, right? And this is where both Ephraim and Judah have been raised and preserved until the end of days, when the final harvest will begin. What have we seen here in America since about 2012, maybe? Is this fascination with bacon.
Yeah.
Bacon.
Everything.
Everybody's
Ice cream and bacon.
They're obsessed with
Donuts and
Chocolate-covered
bacon.
Baconade instead of lemonade.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
It's
awful.
crazy. The other thing we're starting to see
Don't drink
right
the
now.
punch.
Yeah.
Don't drink the punch. Along with that, you're seeing this increase in violence. And I saw a video on YouTube, about a week ago now, and it was somebody who was really they were protesting in a way. I think they were just protesting some Trump supporters, is what it was. But she sounded seriously demon-possessed.
Not even coherent.
No. She
Growling.
wasn't coherent. Growling, screaming. And the first thing I thought is, wow, that person is manifesting demons. And I think what we're seeing is this whole story of the demons in pork being released into the nations, at least here in the U.S., probably maybe in the other nations of the world, which is doing two things. It's this crazy, insatiable desire for pork and bacon, at the same time a manifestation of demonic activity. I think what we're seeing is in 2012, and again, if we go back to the What in the World is Happening series, I actually covered this event. It happened right around 2012.
Go back and study the 2012 Olympics, and
yeah,
we don't want to get hyper spiritual or crazy, but go back and look at it. And the most logical explanation of everything that happened there was true demonic release.
A demonic release.
It really is.
And all these people that were there at the Olympics took it into the nations. We're seeing it manifesting now, like 5 years later.
The bell ringing and all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of things going on that were very demonic. And I think that's where we are in the timeline, is we are in this story of the demonic in the graves. Yeshua cast the pigs. The pigs have been released in the nations. And these demons are now in the nations, which means that the next event will be the woman grabbing the talit from the four corners of the earth and being pulled to the land. So this next event, according to this, what I see, would be the four winds released and the ingathering into the land.
So along with our ordering of events, we don't have a timeline because we're not going to put dates on it, but in ordering of events, we see release of spiritual forces, and then we see a return to sort of a great awakening, going back and grabbing on and going, I need to know. And there are people that the pressure is maybe the tribulum running over us. This is the pressure pushing it out of us. Some people are going to go one way, some people are going to go the other, some people are going to go grab on and go help me. But it's because that spiritual forces have been released on the earth. That whole December 21st, 2012 thing, we may not have seen it in the natural, but in the physical there was really something there.
Now if you look at the
in the spiritual there's really something there.
Yeah. If you look at what's happening in the signs in the heaven, what's coming up next is the total solar eclipse that divides right through the middle of the U.S. That's the next one. I did watch that, Mark Fields.
Wasn't that interesting?
Really
The sign
interesting.
of Jonah.
Yeah, the sign of Jonah. That was really
Over
good.
Nineveh.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, if you want to see this, Mark Biltz did a really good teaching at the end of his Torah teaching on Korah. This would be last week. So look for the teaching on Korah, and at the last, it was about towards the end, you'll have to scroll through to get to the end of it. But he talks about the two solar eclipses which cross the middle of the U.S. in St. Louis, Missouri. And I think that's a division, it's a plumb line, where God is saying, okay, the judgment is coming, make a decision now. Which side are you going to be on? Right after that is the sign of the woman in heaven, with the clothed with the sun, from Revelation 12, which I believe may relate to either the birth pains beginning for the end of days, where the birth pains actually happen, or the birth of the Tzaddik. We talked about that last week, I think it was. The Tzaddik, or something to do with the temple or the priesthood. Maybe we're going to see the temple rebuilt. Maybe we're going to see something with the priesthood. I don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
So let me just lay this out there real quickly. Trace was talking. She said something very important. She said it's time to make a decision. One side or the other, and just take this, roll around for what it's worth. There's something about bacon. There's something about whether we can't understand it. It's such a silly thing, but it's a main arguing point over whether we eat bacon or not. I mean, it doesn't seem like that big a deal. We say, well, it's for health, and so that and that may be true. But I think there's really a representation of God going, will you follow me, even in silly things that you don't understand?
Right.
Or are you going to do what you want to do? And really, any one of us has to, if we're serious, when we're by ourselves thinking about it, it clearly said don't eat it, and we can say, Yeshua did away with that. My question would be, he is the Word, the living Word. Did he change his mind? What's going on? And my personal opinion is there was a reason for it, and it's a way for us to easily show whether or not we're willing to do silly things and put it all on God's side or not. And I think in the time frame that we're in right now, we need to start showing ourselves willing to follow some guidelines for life, or are we just going to make up everything on our own based on, well, it's sort of how we feel, how we've been taught. It's all about love. It's all where there are some specific guidelines. And he says, if you love me, obey my commandments. And when they were saying that, they didn't have the New Testament written yet. So the only commandments you could have obeyed were the commandments that they already had written down in their scripture. But we are in a time period where each one of us has to draw a line as, are we going to follow Yah or not? And I think, it's really important. I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, and it's in these seemingly little things that don't make sense that we are shown as being set apart. And so I think it's a level of holiness. How holy do you want to be? How set apart do you want to be? I mean, how are people going to know that you're different?
And really, that's only the identification mark.
Yeah.
It's going, so is that a seal? So that we're shown as they clearly go, yeah, that person. And is there something about they don't smell like bacon?
Yeah.
They don't, they're different. They won't do it. Why? Not just because God said not to do it, and maybe God was having a bad hair day and he decided to do that. But whatever it was, he said don't do this, and I'm sure he knew why.
Yeah.
So,
So we just don't.
We just
I think
don't.
it's a parable. A lot of time you see the whole idea of taking and eating. That is a parable or a picture or a shadow of teaching, taking in a teaching.
yeah.
And so when he deems something as unclean, the first commandment of them, not to eat of a certain thing,
Don't eat
that
just.
was the downfall. And, a seemingly insignificant thing to eat something. How could that be important, right? But it is to him. And so it's not a salvation issue as far as, because I get a lot of people like, works for salvation. No, it's not about salvation. It's about just obeying what he says to do.
Yeah.
About identifying with. He said it, I don't understand it, I'm just a kid, he's my father, but he said do this, okay, I'll just do it. And isn't it true, don't you find, that when you do it, when you make the first decision, okay, fine, I'm going to do it, don't understand why. But along the line, all of a sudden you start to understand. And you go, oh,
there is some
I'm starting to
understanding
understand why I'm doing this.
Yeah. So what we have now, we're saying we are in the time period of demonic release and this rise in pork in the nations. The next event would be grabbing the four corners and being healed of Nidah. So the woman, or all Israel, being gathered to the land and healed. The one after that would be the little resurrection of the temple from the dead. And if you think about it, people ask me, how could that possibly happen, that they would rebuild the temple right now? It would be impossible. That's what everybody said. She's dead. You're not going to be able to raise her
They
up.
laughed.
They
They
laughed.
They
They
laughed.
made fun of him. You
They
can't
laughed.
raise her up.
Right.
She's not dead. She's just asleep. That one really spoke to me. She's just asleep.
So then how about after that, there's a whole, all kinds of layers. He told them to give her something to eat.
There's food again.
Well, that would show that she's actually a
Alive,
human
yeah.
and alive instead of a spirit.
Well, here we go down another road. So when Yeshua, when they're doubting whether or not he's the real deal, 2 times. One, it's the one, Thomas is going, not sure. He goes, you got any fish? Give me something. The other one's when he shows up, on the shore of the lake, and Peter sees him. He sits, he eats with him. He's, and both times he's in his, whatever you want to call that body. He's
Glorified body.
resurrected body,
Resurrected
whatever that
body,
is.
yeah.
But on the other, but he's
showing there is a physical element here.
He's able to
physical.
eat.
There is a
And so
physical element.
There it is that, and you talked about it, the apple thing, the pork thing. Don't eat this. That's not food. There's something about the eating and the ingesting.
Right.
That's a picture of our spirits.
Yeah.
When he says that's not food, don't eat it. There's a lot of teaching. If it is not his word, don't eat it.
Right.
Right.
Stay away from it.
Right.
He says that's not food for you.
Right.
Don't
Good
eat that.
point.
Yeah.
When
Okay.
people get off into
Yes.
reading like extra biblical books or
Yes.
books that contradict Torah,
That's
Right.
not food.
that's
That's
not
not
food.
Don't
Well,
eat it.
there's a
It
difference
will make you
between-
Oh,
sick.
good one. I
There's-
like that.
I want to be real careful. There's a difference between extra biblical and wrong, because sometimes there's some great historical value.
Oh, that's
in
true, like the book of
everything.
Jasher,
There's some
right,
great
you
historical
know.
stuff in there.
That's
But
fine.
But at the end of the day, if it doesn't line up with Torah, it's not food.
It's not.
Not
Right.
food.
Yeah. Okay. So
I think we should
I
take
think-
a break.
one more point, and then we're going to take a break, and we'll finish out the red heifer. So the ashes of the red heifer, we're going to talk about this just real quick. They're stored in 3 places. So they burnt up this whole red heifer and then collected its ashes. One portion was stored on the Mount of Olives for use by the Kohanim, or the priests. One portion was kept in the kiel, next to the wall of the courtyard, a special area of the courtyard of the temple, for safekeeping when the Messiah returns, which I thought was so cool.
That is cool.
So you see right there, they're waiting. Once they get that red heifer, Messiah will be able to use it. The third portion was divided up among the 24 courses of the priests, and these ashes would be used for purifying the people. And then this purification ceremony of sprinkling the asher water mixture might well be a precursor for the Messiah's return, the ingathering of the exiles to the land, the resurrection of the dead, and the final redemption. And that was from Dina Dye's teaching on this, which I thought was wonderful. So this whole story of the red heifer, but the ashes themselves are a precursor to the return of Yeshua, and the sprinkling of the ashes. So, that being said, I think that is it for the red heifer. The next thing,
I have one more question. How many times did they do this red heifer?
whenever they ran out of ashes.
Whenever they ran out.
So how long would a red heifer's ashes last?
I think, if I remember reading
Sounds
correctly,
like something you should
there
Google.
have been...
How long do red heifers
They
ashes
actually
last?
know. There have been 9 red heifers, I think it is. The 10th red heifer is going to be this next one,
Okay.
and they believe that that was the one the Messiah will
There's
use.
only been 9.
They
It
lasted
lasted a
forever.
while.
So it lasts a
long
long time.
Wow.
You don't need very much of the ashes. It's a big bull, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it was a female.
A female, yeah.
But
Big
I
heifer.
guess you just needed a little bit.
Well,
in
you know,
the
well, but the deal is, I mean, look at it. What Solomon's temple is really, really approximate numbers, around between 950 and 1000 BC. And then they ran, and then they had a gap where it was when 586 they burned it down,
Okay.
and then they had a gap. They started, and I'm not exactly sure when they got back into operation, but they came back 70 years later in the early part of the 500 BC, so it was like 516 or whatever, and whatever Nehemiah and Ezra and those guys got that thing rebuilt, and then they went roaring along again, so it was another 400 and something years. So we're talking 400 plus another 400, so it was over, it was like, and then into 70 AD, so we're talking 800 to 900 years.
9 red heifers.
9 red heifers?
So-
I know, that's,
100.
that was put together for right now. We hadn't ever talked about this before, but it's looking like somewhere around 100 years per heifer. Because we know how long the temple was there.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But I thought it was cool that the 10th one is
Yeah.
going to be used by the Messiah.
Of course, I wonder how, you don't have to sprinkle much in there, and one big,
Well, did the
Cows.
first, does that count the one for the tabernacle in the wilderness?
I don't know.
Okay.
Good question.
that's true. If there had been if it
And what
started
about
there,
David's temple?
it
I
was-
mean, what-
well,
is
David didn't
this-
have a temple,
I mean,
but
right.
Yeah,
yeah,
they, have
but-
to, they still have to.
well, the
but
question
you're
is, were they
talking,
doing it at that
did-
point? They probably were. They were probably still,
Yeah.
because the sanctuary, the tabernacle was still up in Shiloh, I
Right,
think, at that point in
right.
time. So, so they did it there. So
Right.
actually, you got to shove it all the way back to like 1400 BC or something like that. So, of course, what does one of those cows weigh? I don't know. I'm obviously not an egg guy, but they're probably pushing 1,000 pounds, something like that. So it would,
And everything's burned up.
and it's all burned up. So that'd be a lot of ash.
That would be. Okay, we're going to take a break and come back again in a couple minutes, and we'll look at the death of Miriam, water from the rock, and serpent on a pole, which all has prophetic stories as well.